The North Node in Synastry. It is about evolutionary pushes. What most Synastry contacts don't necessarily describe is direction. The North Node is different. It doesn't primarily describe how two people feel together. It describes where the relationship is pointed. The North Node represents the soul's growth imperative in this lifetime. Not where you are comfortable, not where you have mastery, but where you are being called to develop. The territory that feels unfamiliar, specifically because you haven't practiced it yet. The direction that produces a specific kind of productive discomfort whenever you move toward it. The discomfort that, once you learn to recognize it, signals that you're actually on course. In Synastry, when one person's chart makes significant contact with another's North Node, something specific happens. The North Node person's developmental imperative becomes relational. The relationship starts pulling in a direction. What that direction feels like, what it activates, and what it asks for. That's what this piece is about. North Node contacts in Synastry activate the part of each person that is oriented toward growth, not the part that wants to rest in what's already known, but the part that knows, on some level, that it's supposed to be doing something it hasn't fully done yet. For the North Node person, the one whose node is being contacted, the primary activation is directional. Their growth imperative becomes harder to avoid. Questions that had been comfortably in the background start moving to the foreground. What am I actually trying to build? Where am I going? What have I been putting off? The relationship doesn't create these questions, but it makes them more pressing, more undeniable, more charged with urgency. The person whose chart is making the contact, the one whose planet, angle, or point lands on the other's North Node, often acts as an involuntary catalyst. They may not be aware of this function at all. They're simply being who they are, inhabiting qualities and capacities in ways that feel natural to them. But those qualities happen to be precisely what the node person is being called to develop, which makes them profoundly compelling in a way that exceeds ordinary attraction. The specific themes activated depend on which house and sign the North Node occupies, the domain of life where the growth is concentrated. But some dynamics show up consistently across all North Node Synastry contacts. Purpose and life direction become live themes. The relationship tends to raise questions about trajectory, not just what do we want together, but who am I trying to become? And is this relationship moving me toward or away from that? This often surfaces, without being named, as a persistent undercurrent of seriousness beneath the connection. Ambition and aspiration get amplified. Around a North Node contact, many people find their drive activated, a heightened sense of what's possible, a renewed relationship to their own potential. This can feel energizing. It can also feel pressurizing, depending on how much of the North Node's territory has been genuinely engaged versus avoided. The South Node's defaults become visible by contrast. The South Node is where the person is most habituated, most comfortable, most likely to retreat under pressure. When a North Node contact is active, those retreats become more obvious because the relationship keeps pointing in the opposite direction. Learning an unfamiliar territory and the specific discomfort of being seen as less than competent in a domain that matters becomes a recurring relational experience. The most characteristic North Node Synastry experience is a quality of forward pull that coexists with anxiety. The relationship feels like it has weight, not in the heavy, ominous way of a difficult Saturn contact, but in the sense of implications, of this mattering. of there being something on the line beyond the present moment. People often describe North Node contacts as feeling purposeful before they can explain what the purpose is. The connection feels significant in a direction they haven't yet named. The node person is often drawn to the contact person in ways that go beyond liking them. There's often something in the contact person that the node person finds both compelling and slightly destabilizing, not because the contact person is doing anything wrong, but because they embody qualities the node person is being called toward but hasn't yet fully claimed. Spending time with someone who lives easily in your growth territory is both energizing and mildly confronting. The "this leads somewhere" feeling is real and distinctive. It's different from the warmth of a moon contact or the pleasure of Venus. It's more directional than comfortable. The relationship seems to be oriented toward a future state rather than simply enjoying the present one. Some people find this energizing. Others find it quietly pressurizing, like being in the company of someone who makes you aware of what you haven't yet done. There's also the imposter syndrome dimension, when the North Node territory starts to open up, when the node person begins genuinely engaging with what they've been avoiding or unable to access. It rarely feels smooth. It tends to feel like being new at something in front of someone who isn't. That specific vulnerability of being a beginner in territory that matters to you is a North Node Synastry signature. The central complication of North Node Synastry is also the most subtle. The risk of using the relationship as a proxy for the growth, rather than actually doing the growth. Being near someone who embodies your North Node territory feels like being in the territory. It produces the feeling of momentum, of direction, of being on path. But being in the presence of someone who lives the North Node does not automatically develop one's own capacity in it. The growth still has to be done, and a relationship that feels developmental can sometimes become a way of being adjacent to development without being inside it. The idealization risk follows from this. When the contact person is seen primarily as the embodiment of everything the node person is working toward, they stop being seen as an actual person. They become a symbol, a mirror, a representation of the node person's aspirations. This is one of the characteristic ways North Node Synastry goes wrong, not through conflict, but through the node person relating to the contact person as a destination rather than a human being. The asymmetry is another consistent complication. North Node contacts are structurally asymmetrical. One person's development is being more directly activated than the others. The node person tends to need more from the relationship in the developmental sense than the contact person is necessarily positioned to provide. When this imbalance is not named, it can produce a dynamic where the node person is consistently the one doing the reaching, the learning, the being pushed, and the contact person is consistently in the position of the teacher or the model. This can serve both parties for a while. Over time, without conscious renegotiation, it tends to strain the relationship. The discomfort of the growth edge also has a shadow form in Synastry. Because North Node contacts produce a kind of productive anxiety, it can be difficult to distinguish between the healthy discomfort of genuine development and the unhealthy discomfort of something simply not fitting. Not all relational anxiety is the growth edge. Some of it is just anxiety. And because the North Node contact has a quality of weight and significance that can make it feel important regardless of what's actually happening, it's worth examining honestly whether the discomfort is directional or simply difficult. Finally, there's the pace problem. North Node contacts can accelerate development so quickly that neither person has time to integrate what's being activated. The growth is real. But growth without integration tends to be unstable. The relationship that feels like it's moving fast may be producing change faster than it can be properly assimilated. When North Node Synastry is working well, the primary gift it offers is a relationship that actually helps someone become who they're trying to become, not by telling them to, not by being a cheerleader, but through the simple fact of its existence and direction. The most generative form of a North Node contact is one where the contact person's presence creates a consistent, unforced opening toward the node person's growth territory, not by pushing explicitly, but by embodying, by simply being someone who lives in the area the node person is developing. The node person learns by proximity, by observation, by the gradual normalization of what felt foreign. The growth happens through the relationship's texture rather than its content. This is where the mentor-student dynamic at its best lives. The contact person doesn't need to be a formal teacher, but when they inhabit the node's territory naturally, the node person finds the territory less intimidating in their presence. The threshold lowers. What felt impossible starts to feel like something that could be practiced. There's also the quality of shared direction. When both parties are able to identify the developmental orientation of the connection, when they can name, at least loosely, the direction the relationship points toward, the North Node contact becomes a powerful source of mutual purpose. The couple who feels like they're going somewhere together, the collaboration that feels like it's building something real, the friendship that consistently leaves both people feeling like they should be taking their lives more seriously in the best possible way. The amplification of aspiration, when it's working, is one of the most practically useful things a relationship can offer. Around a North Node contact, the node person tends to feel more capable of what they've been putting off, more willing to try what they've been avoiding, more oriented toward the version of themselves they've been gesturing at, but not fully inhabiting. That quality of a relationship that makes you braver in the direction of your own growth is genuinely rare and genuinely valuable. The North Node in Synastry describes direction, not comfort. If you're using comfort as the primary metric for whether this relationship is good, whether it feels easy, familiar, and settled, a North Node contact may chronically underperform. That's not a sign it isn't working. The North Node's domain is the unfamiliar, and a relationship rooted in it will often feel more purposeful than comfortable, especially early. The person whose chart activates your North Node is not the same as your North Node. This is the most important distinction in North Node synastry. The contact person may embody what you're called to develop, but they are a distinct human being, not a symbol of your growth or a mirror for your potential. The moment they become primarily a representation of where you're going, rather than a person you're in relationship with, the connection has drifted into idealization. That drift tends to end badly. The discomfort is diagnostic, but not determinative. The specific anxiety of the North Node growth edge, the feeling of being new at something that matters, of being seen as incompetent in territory you care about, is a reliable signal that you're in North Node territory, but it doesn't tell you whether the relationship is right. Discomfort at the growth edge is not the same as the discomfort of a bad fit. They can feel identical. The question worth returning to is whether the discomfort is producing movement or just pain. The asymmetry needs to be acknowledged. One person's development is being more directly activated than the others, and that means the relationship has an inherent directional quality that, over time, requires conscious tending. If it stays permanently asymmetrical, if one person is always the student and the other always the teacher, always the one arriving fully formed, and the other always the one struggling to catch up. The relationship needs to find a way to renegotiate its terms. Development is not a sustainable basis for a lasting connection on its own. It needs to develop into something more mutual. The growth still has to be done. Being in relationship with someone who embodies your North Node can make the territory feel accessible, can lower the threshold, make it feel possible, give you permission you didn't previously feel you had. But the development itself belongs to you. The relationship can open the door. You still have to walk through it. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you for watching.